You're now listening to the Boys in the Booth podcast with your hosts, Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. New episodes every Monday on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Good evening and welcome to episode 147 of the podcast. Cody, Abrams, and Melbourne with you for this one on this Monday evening in November. Boys, how we doing?
Doing good, Harp. I'm excited for this weekend. I'm going to the Devils-Toronto game Thursday night and then skipping down the 401 even further and going to the Ottawa Devils game. So 2 games in 1 week. They're on a 9-game win streak. Can't wait to watch them lose both games, but it's going to be fun doing it in person.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that case on the Saturday, joining you in Ottawa to see that afternoon game. But you're right, the odds really aren't in the Devils' favor here. Like, what are the odds they win 11 straight games? You know, that would be great to see.
Knowing that I'm going to the games, definitely not.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I'm good. I had a good weekend. It was Maverick's first birthday, my nephew Maverick. So I went home to Brockville to go to his birthday party, and what a party it was. I got some great pictures and videos of the little guy, and you know, I was happy to be there. And now I'm back home, back on the grind. I was just talking to Harper before we started. Like, I'm halfway done law school in like 4 weeks. It's insane. Like, this year has flown by, and I can't believe I have exams coming up in like 3 weeks. Like, it's ridiculous. But I mean, other than all the schoolwork I'm gonna have to do, you know, it's a good time of year. The Leafs are kind of buzzing again. You know, they're not at the very basement of the league, which is good. And you know, it seems like things are starting to come back to normal. So yeah, all smiles over here. Harp, how about you?
Yeah, doing good. Had another good weekend. It was kind of a chill weekend, and looking forward to this week because I'll be at a couple of Sens games as well. Wednesday, I'm going to see them against the Sabres, and haven't gotten to see Buffalo in a couple of years with COVID and everything, so really excited to see them in Ottawa. And then I'm going to be there on Saturday, as you guys know, working for the Senators. I've got a shift with them on Saturday. It's Spartacat's birthday party or something, so that'll be kind of fun. And yeah, I'll see you guys at the game. So no, looking forward to this week, and all is well on this side.
Love it. So should we get into some fantasy corner?
Yeah, sounds good. All right, another edition of Fantasy Corner, and this is week 5 of Fantasy Corner, I believe. Yes, okay, so week 5, and I will kick it off. The Sunnyvale
week 6.
Week 6, okay, thank you. So anyway, week 6 of Fantasy Corner, and the Sunnyvale hockey team is on a bit of a win streak right now. 3rd win in a row for my guys, 150 to 142 over our good buddy Nate Gagne's team. There were a lot of close finishes this week, as we all know, which was really great to see. Evgeny Kuznetsov was my best performer with 29.5 fantasy points this week. Obviously, the Capitals didn't look too good the other night against Tampa Bay, but Kuzi was my best performer. And yeah, pick up my 3rd straight win and looking to keep it rolling. Case, how about you?
Well, my game was not a close match, I'll tell you that. I lost. My team underperformed like crazy. I think they were 11 points off the projection, and it was tough to watch. But in the week, I was able to make a pretty big trade, and I'm excited moving forward. I noticed that Jake McKenzie had great defense and shit wingers, and I have great wingers and shit defense. So I thought, you know what? We can make a deal. I think the defense he had was Victor Hedman, Adam Fox, Quinn Hughes, and Drew Doughty. Like, I think that's a little overdoing the defense side of things. So I texted him, I said, I want one of your defensemen. Johnny Hockey is on the block. And he said, well, you know what? I have 3 Vancouver players on my team. That's hurting for games play. So I'll give you Quinn Hughes for Johnny Gaudreau. I said, you know, I kind of think that Johnny Gaudreau is the better player at the end of the year in that deal. So I wanted to look for a little more. And I said, I want to break up my Boston players. I'll give you Matt Grzelcyk for Nick Paul on top of this, and that way no transactions after the trade. You don't have to drop someone to pick up a winger, and I don't have to drop someone to pick up a defenseman or vice versa. So Nick Paul and Quinn Hughes for Johnny Hockey and Matt Grzelcyk. Pretty excited about that deal.
Yeah, that's the second massive trade you've made so far. The first one was Kyle Connor for Johnny Gaudreau straight up. So you go ahead and flip Gaudreau and get a decent return. I've been trying to trade with Jake since the league began because I noticed that too, that he has a really, really good back end. But it's just tough. Like the 1-for-1s, they're never going to happen. So getting the 2-for-2 trade done, that's how these deals kind of have to shake out, because you get worse at one position but better at another. So then it's like, you kind of have to, there's a bit of a trade-off, like how much better are you getting at this position versus how much worse you're getting at the other position. So when I ran the poll in our group chat, every single person who voted on the poll said that it was a dead even trade. So, and I kind of agree. Despite the fact that I think Gaudreau is more valuable than Hughes, you're getting a nice return on the second swap there. So I didn't mind that one bit.
I think it was like a real hockey trade in that it satisfied both of our needs really well. Like I had 2 Columbus players and 2 Boston players. He had 3 Vancouver players. I needed a defenseman. He needed a winger. It really satisfied both of us. Yeah,
for sure. My week last week, guys, was close right down to the wire. I was playing the Dirty Birdies, who is Jeffrey Frazier, I believe. Case, your buddy Jeffrey. Yep. And it finished 219 to 214, which was super close, and it came down right to the final day. The difference between the two teams, I think I was projected to win from the very start, but he had McDavid, who had a good week. Obviously, he picked first overall in our league, so any team with McDavid, he can just carry a week and win. Thankfully for me, he didn't, and Dirty Birdies fell a few points short of beating me. So I remained perfect, 5-0. I had a few players last week who had decent weeks. JT Miller, Brad Marchand, Travis Konechny, all over 23 points for me, which was great to see. I'm still waiting on some players, to get healthy. Seth Jones is one who's still on the IR, and Mackenzie Blackwood. But overall, it was a good week for me. Even though there's a bit of a scare, I remain 5-0, and so does Kuznetsov's third line, which is my buddy Jacob. So 2 teams are still perfect. We're seeing who's going to flop first. But last thing I wanted to add to is this week, a good player to pick up. This is what I'm trying to do every fantasy corner, mention a few guys who are good to pick up. This week I'm going to go with Max Domi because he's eligible to play all 3 positions up front, center and both wings. Plus, Chicago plays 4 games this week, and he's second on the Blackhawks in points with 10. So Max Domi and, frankly, any Chicago Blackhawk player up front, whether it's him or Taves or even a few guys on the back end in the absence of Seth Jones kind of stepping up and playing more minutes, like a Connor Murphy and or guys like that, could be valuable pickups this week in fantasy, even if they weren't ranked very high at the start of the year.
All right, good stuff. That's another edition of Fantasy Corner, and now we'll get into the meat and potatoes of the episode, and we're going to be talking about one of our favorite themes, of course, on this podcast. You've all heard it before, but players who have benefited from a change of scenery. One of our favorite sayings, themes on the podcast, however you want to word it. We actually got change of scenery put on some of our merch as well, and we're going to be talking about players who have benefited from a change of scenery so far this season. So I have one guy, Case, I know you've got one as well, Chad. I know you've got one, and with a couple of honorable mentions, and so we'll get into that now. So, Case, we'll start with you with your player who has benefited from a change of scenery so far this season.
This podcast is sponsored by Liquid IV. Winter is back, and whether you're playing pond hockey or nursing an eggnog hangover this holiday season, Liquid IV has you covered. Just one stick of Liquid IV in 16 ounces of water hydrates faster and more efficiently than water alone. It contains 5 essential vitamins: B3, B5, B6, B12, and vitamin C. It's made with 3 times the electrolytes of traditional sports drinks, premium ingredients, non-GMO, and free from gluten, dairy, and soy. There are plenty of awesome flavors too, but my personal favorite is lemon lime. Get 20% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use the promo code boys_in_the_booth. That's 20% off anything when you order using the promo code boys_in_the_booth at liquidiv.com. Experience better hydration today with Liquid IV. This podcast is sponsored by the ticket app SeatGeek. SeatGeek takes all the confusion out of buying tickets, making it quick and easy to get the best deals on tickets to your favorite sporting events. Plus, Boys in the Booth listeners get $20 off their first ticket purchase on SeatGeek with the promo code BOYSINTHEBOOTH in all caps. So click the link in the description down below to download the app, and remember to get your discounted tickets using the code BOYSINTHEBOOTH in all caps. Get great seats for a fraction of the cost with SeatGeek.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about a guy that's helped me out in fantasy a lot this year. I picked him up, and at the right time too, because he got put on the first line with Detroit, and I think in his first 4 games on the first line, he had 9 points, and that's Dominik Kubalik, a guy who thrived in his first season in the NHL, scoring 30 goals for Chicago, and then he's been kind of quiet ever since. The second year wasn't bad, but it was the pandemic shortened year, and then last year was kind of a write-off. He turned out to be a third line player on Chicago, and I'll tell you, the change of scenery has done great things for him. He's on pace for 98 points this season. He's got 7 goals, 11 assists in 15 games, and his career high in assists is 21. He's on pace to absolutely obliterate that number. The one thing I've noticed about him that is really standing out to me is that he's up there in points, and I think he was tied for first on Detroit last I looked, with relatively low time on ice. I think his points per 60 is 4.39 points per 60, and that puts him at 11th in the league, just behind my guy Jesper Bratt. So he's taking every minute he gets and really putting in a good shift. His game against Detroit, or against New Jersey, he was the most noticeable player on the ice at all times for me. He just finds open ice so well, and I've really enjoyed what he's doing there, and I'm kind of rooting for him, especially because I have him in fantasy.
I was going to say, there's a fantasy connection there that I think you haven't mentioned yet, because I know you've been very high on the guy all year because, rightfully so, he's been incredible. So that's great to hear. You always wonder when a bunch of new players hop into a mix, like what happened there in Detroit. They've got a bunch of new guys trying to play a system. Like how are they going to gel? How is the line chemistry going to, shake out as the year goes on? But Kubalik has found himself a nice spot in that lineup, even though he's not playing as much as, maybe you would expect him to be after looking at the numbers. But he's had just a great start to the season. In case there's a reason I didn't pick Kubalik, because I figured you would bring him up with the fantasy connection and everything. So yeah, what a great start to the season for the guy.
I was a little surprised in the pick, honestly, Case. I thought for sure you were going to go with John Marino of your Devils, but you went with the fantasy connection there, which was great. He's had a fabulous start. I'm still kind of wondering why Kyle Davidson and the Blackhawks gave this guy up. I know he kind of struggled the past 2 years, but still a young guy and still one of those guys who has a great shot. He's proven before that he can put the puck in the back of the net. Him and Victor Olofsson kind of broke out at the same time a couple of years ago, if you guys remember, and they were in that Calder Trophy conversation sort of down the list a little bit, and Buffalo ultimately decided to hang on to Olofsson just because he's one of those guys that he's just able to be a trigger man and just fire the puck and score goals. And Chicago ultimately decided to let go of this guy. And, again, Steve Yzerman and the Red Wings proving that not only are they good at the draft table, but they're pretty darn good at pro scouting as well. So this guy's had a great start. That's a great pick.
Yeah, I had to go with him over Marino because I think I've talked Marino to death so far this season. Everyone knows that he's been like my favorite guy on New Jersey this year, best defenseman. But I had the fantasy connection with Kubalik, and it's also good to point out, you pointed out that he had a great rookie season, and he was kind of head-to-head with Victor Olofsson. While I did not like the guy back then because he was a 24-year-old rookie and everyone was giving him the Calder, and I just hate that. So, yeah.
Yep.
I've gone, full circle. I'm or 180, I guess you should say. I love him now. He's my guy.
Yeah, and your second favorite player, Michael Bunting.
Yeah, not even close.
All right, Chadwick, let's go to you now. And I know you've got one guy in particular, but maybe a couple honorable mentions as well.
That's right. I for all of these, I always have a few honorable mentions. I feel like Casey normally does too, if he wasn't busy right before we hopped on here. But the one honorable mention I want to bring up is a guy I already talked about, and that's Max Domi. Like I said, he's second on the team in points in Chicago, coming over from Carolina after being flipped at the deadline last season. And, he's fit in pretty nicely in the top six in Chicago, mainly because, he's one of the only offensive weapons that they have up front now, aside from your Taves and Canes of the world, etc. But right now, Max Domi is proving that, he deserves maybe to be flipped again at the deadline to another contending team. And, that's really what he's playing for at this point. He's playing for his next contract, and he's playing for, the opportunity to get flipped at the deadline to a contending team. So 10 points in 14 games. He's off to a great start. And looking at the advanced numbers too, in terms of the expected goals that he's generating, it's pretty much on par with what he's scored so far. So it doesn't seem like he's going to regress because he's getting such a great opportunity up front in Chicago. So any thoughts on Max Domi as sort of an honorable mention before I get to my meat and potatoes here?
Okay, I think I called them last chance U at the beginning of the season because there's just so many guys that seem to be getting a crack at, some real minutes on this team, and a lot of new faces on Chicago because they traded everyone except, the big two. And so it seemed almost inevitable that we'd be talking about at least one guy on this team having a great change of scenery story, and Max Domi is definitely the great candidate for that and the perfect choice, honestly, out of all of them. He's been great for them, and hopefully he finds himself on a playoff team after the trade or at the trade deadline.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's crazy to think that Domi was a 70-point guy a few years ago with the Montreal Canadiens. That's where he really broke out, and then things kind of went sour with him there afterwards, and didn't particularly get along well with Claude Julien at the time and when he was behind the bench in Montreal. But we've always known that the talent is there with Max Domi, but he's been around the block a little bit now. He's had some experiences, and it was a very interesting pickup for Carolina to make at the deadline. I kind of forgot about Domi last year at the deadline, but he played decently well for Columbus, and we knew that when Chicago signed him in the offseason, they were tearing things down. They were giving guys like him, Athanasiou, Colin Blackwell, etc., good opportunities on this roster, and he's taken it so far, and he's run with it. He's got the talent. We've always known that. He's got a lot of heart, just like his dad when he played, and so, happy for Max Domi, and I think potentially Chicago's got a nice trade chip to use here.
Yeah, they can for sure get a pick and maybe a prospect at the deadline for him, depending on what the market looks like. But okay, that was my honorable mention there. The player I wanted to talk about as a guy who has really benefited from a change of scenery. Not that he was bad before, but just the fact that he's really good this season to start anyway. That's Andre Burakovsky. Going from Colorado to Seattle, he got that big ticket. And, Seattle was a team who, we talked about last year as needing guys who can score because, frankly, they didn't score a lot of goals last year. Well, Burakovsky is certainly generating that offense for them this year, which was something they lacked. He has 14 points in 16 games, leads Seattle in points, and notably primary assists, which is, probably the second most difficult thing to come by in the NHL. First being goals, of course, but primary assists, that's a solid marker of, repeatability, I guess I will say. So I'm happy to see that Burakovsky is playing well, and hopefully he's able to continue playing well with this new team. They're also 8-5-3 to start the season, and Burakovsky is a big part of that. So I'm just happy to see that he's playing well in a new jersey and kind of now being relied on as more of the guy as opposed to a tertiary player like he was in Colorado. So very happy for Burakovsky. Thoughts on him, guys?
Yeah, he's been secondary scoring everywhere he's been so far. So when you heard this move, him going to Seattle, it's the perfect fit for the puzzle here. And we knew that he was going to be right to the first line, be looked at as the scoring threat for this team. So it certainly worked out for him. And yeah, I think we could have titled this episode and put Burakovsky as the thumbnail back in the summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't sure about this deal because it is a big ticket for Burakovsky in Seattle, but it's been a perfect fit so far. The deal looks great. They were a team, Casey, you kind of alluded to it there a second ago. They were a team looking for more offense, and we suggested Burakovsky to a couple of teams, actually, that were looking for more just easy goals, and those two teams were Seattle and Carolina. He ultimately ends up going to the Kraken. It's been a great fit so far, and let's not forget, too, that the guy's won 2 Stanley Cups already in his young career. He was pretty good as a Washington Capital and just won with Colorado as well. I know that he was kind of in and out of the lineup a little bit down the stretch with the Avs and was hurt, but still a very good, talented offensive player. We knew that he was going to sign somewhere on a big ticket this offseason. Seattle's buzzing right now. They're a lot better than last year, and he's been great so far. Just a really, really good offensive player.
For sure. Okay, let's hear yours, Harp.
All right, so I'm going to go back to the Chicago Blackhawks theme, and guys either leaving Chicago or arriving to Chicago. So we're talking about the Blackhawks a lot on this pod, which is interesting, but I'm going to talk about a guy who left Chicago, and it's really benefited him, and that is Kirby Dach of the Montreal Canadiens. I had no idea until today, actually, boys, how good he's been in Montreal. He's got 14 points in 15 games. He's almost a point-a-game player, and what a pickup here for the Habs. We talked about it with Kubalik, why the Blackhawks gave him up, and I'm wondering the same thing, why they gave up 21-year-old Kirby Dach, a third overall pick in 2019. I know he had a couple of rough years there, but especially when you're rebuilding, I'm scratching my head and wondering why Kyle Davidson decided to let this guy go. It was a big swing that Kent Hughes took at the draft when he acquired this guy for a first-round pick and let go of Alexander Romanov in that first round as well. But, man, it's paying off, and he's been that third guy on that top line with Caulfield and Suzuki. Man, that could end up being one of the best lines in the NHL for years to come. This is so good for the Montreal Canadiens. He looks like a core piece to a very young, exciting team right now that's staying in the mix, that is staying in the race, and him playing with Caulfield and Suzuki, it's just a great fit. He's a big body. We know that the talent is there. He just had a couple of rough years, and this goes back to getting injured right before the World Juniors. He was the captain of Team Canada. He got hurt right before the tournament, and then that followed up with a couple of tough years in Chicago afterwards. So this guy's really benefited from a change of scenery. I love the player, and I'm really happy for him in Montreal.
Yeah, I'm really happy about this move for Kirby Dach because everyone loved him due to the World Juniors. And I don't think that Chicago did anything right with this guy. They shoehorned him into the NHL a little early, in my opinion. And then weird utilization and then trying to get him back after injury right away. It just didn't seem like they picked right at all. And now trading him is the biggest error they've made yet. So I don't know. I was definitely a little shocked when you think about direction. You try to think about where a team is heading. These are the type of trades that you get confused with. Like Montreal's made a few of those trades as well, as same as like the Senators 2 years ago or last year. They've figured it out. Maybe, I don't know. And but yeah, this has been great for Kirby Dach, and it's been a great fit. And that team is young and fun. They're not very good yet, but they're fun, and they will be good.
Yeah, Case, you said that they shoehorned Kirby Dach into the league. Not only did they force him into the league too early, when he should have gone and played a year either in the minors or in junior or whatever, wherever, somewhere with lesser competition where he could dominate. But they also kind of pigeonholed him as well into like a third line center role when he was playing there. Yeah. And he was playing down the middle against tough competition with a defensive assignment. And it was like just kind of mind boggling how he was utilized. And like now you look at him in Montreal, he's playing on the top line. He's playing wing. And it's like, idea, play him somewhere where he can succeed. And that's what Montreal's doing, playing him on the top line with two of their best players. And he's had a great start. The thing is about, the whole trade and everything that happened at the draft there, he didn't fit the timeline for the Blackhawks anymore. Neither do Taves and Kane, but they're, I guess, more difficult to move because they're bigger deals. But if this team is going to properly rebuild, which it seems like they are, the trade doesn't really confuse me much because in exchange for Dach, who, yes, is young, but kind of soured over the years because, like we mentioned, he was pigeonholed into a spot and forced in the league and blah, 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 blah. Now they have Kevin Kurchinski, and he should be good in the future. So it's like... yeah. He fits their timeline more is what I'm trying to get at. And I don't fault them for doing that.
Kirby Dach was going to become the next Clayton Keller if it wasn't for this deal, I think.
Yes, exactly. So I am glad that the deal happened, and I don't fault Blackhawks management. You don't hear that often. I don't fault Blackhawks management. You usually do fault them because they've been terrible over the years, but I don't fault them for this move because they are leaning into a rebuild, getting a younger player and doing it properly.
Yeah.
So,
and that wasn't a shot at Clayton Keller, by the way. That was like he's entering his prime and the team is still trailing behind. It's like a weird time for him. He was a young guy playing right when they started the rebuild.
Yes, yeah. And a similar situation, like not that the team is bad, but a similar situation with a prospect right now that we're seeing in Toronto actually is Nick Robertson. It's like, is he an NHL player or not? And I know it's kind of different, but it's like eventually, if you don't have a guy in a favorable position for a long enough period of time and see some production, essentially you're kind of just ruining the prospect, and that's. That could have happened with Dach. I'm not saying that Keller was ruined, but I get the whole point there that you were making, Case, that, Keller was just there at a time, probably too early, and now he's just there still sticking around. And, it can't be good on a guy to not produce at the level that you have at every other level before that when you get to the NHL, right? Like, it's got to be frustrating and difficult if you're that kind of player. So anyway, Kirby Dach has had a phenomenal start to the season, and I am pumped for the guy because he deserves it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just quickly on Clayton Keller, like, you know, he's finally starting to produce now, as you guys said, which is great to see. And that team is getting better, and which is great. And but with Chicago, yes, they make this deal, and to me, at least, it was a bit of a head scratcher. But, you know, talk about taking big swings at that draft. Kent Hughes took a couple of big swings for Montreal, but so did Kyle Davidson. Like, let's not forget that, and I know we're getting a little off topic here talking about the Blackhawks, but, like, let's not forget that the Blackhawks didn't have a first-round pick going into that draft, and they ended up with 3. And the Korchinski pick, that was actually from the Ottawa trade for Alex DeBrincat. So I think the pick to take Frank Nazar was the pick that they got from Montreal, and then they had a third in there when they drafted Sam Rinzel. So to get rid of Doc and DeBrincat, two big parts of your team, but to get Korchinski and Nazar, that's pretty good as well.
Yeah, so the guy that's
fell pretty far too. So
the guy that's already commented on this post saying, like, oh, it was the Frank Mazur pick, not the Korchinski trick. You can go back and reply to your own comment and settle down.
Yeah, and you know what, Case? It's funny because I said before we started the show that I wasn't streaming. Well, it turns out I am on YouTube, so no comments yet. But you know, if you are watching this live, don't want to hear about me messing up the picks. You know, it was one of the two. They were picked pretty close. I think it was like, I mean, God, I don't want to dig myself a deeper hole here, but I think it was like 7th and 13th or something. So pretty damn close.
No one needs to comment now. I got you. It's all good.
Thanks, Harp. I have a couple more honorable mentions. Can I throw in a couple here, Harp? Are you finished with?
No, we can't have it.
Case,
yes,
you're shaking your head. You're shaking your head, but you're going to like this one. One honorable mention, it's kind of actually two wrapped up into one, is former Washington Capitals goalies who have benefited from a change of scenery. Obviously, the two that I'm talking about are Ilya Samsonov, or Samsonov, as he prefers to be called now, and Vitek Vanacek. Sammy is 6-2-0 with a .921 save and a 4.9 goal save above expected. And Vanacek is 6-1-0, and his numbers, advanced numbers anyway, are a little bit worse, but they're still pretty good. And the only number that matters is the record, really, 6-1-0. So two former Washington goalies that have had great starts to the season and have benefited from a change of scenery. Last honorable mention I wanted to bring up was Matthew Tkachuk. And not that he's had an absolutely insane start to the season, but, you know, he has 17 points in 13 games played. But the reason I wanted to bring him up is that compared to Jonathan Huberdeau, he's having a far better start to the year. And obviously those two will be forever tied to each other as, you know, the years go on and they keep playing in the league. Huberdeau right now has 6 points in 11 games, and he's not even generating a ton of expected goals. So Matthew Tkachuk is another guy who has had a great start to the season, so I wanted to mention him too as an honorable mention.
Yeah, that's a good one for sure. Another guy in Florida is Colin White, who's been a good fit for them there after being bought out in the summer by the Senators. So good picks all around, boys. Again, one of our favorite themes on the pod, a change of scenery, and it was good to take a look at some guys that found some new homes this offseason, and it's really worked out well for them. So
it's always anyway, just a positive story.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a positive story when we're talking about this.
Yeah. You love to hear it.
Last week was all negative. It was the disappointment podcast with disappointment starts. So glad we're back to positivity this week. That's good. Anyway, great stuff, boys. That does it for episode 47. Thanks so much once again, and to our listeners as well. I will see you guys on Saturday at the CTC in Ottawa. Looking forward to that. And we'll chat again next week. Thanks so much.
This has been another episode of Boys in the Booth with Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. New episodes every Monday on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Connect with the Boys in the Booth on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Boys in the Booth. Visit boysinthebooth.com for show details, and don't forget, you can become a patron of the podcast for just $1 a month at www.patreon.com/boysinthebooth.